Okay, so to help us make sense of maybe where things are going to go from here, I want to bring in Barry Appleton. He's a professor, international trade lawyer and policy strategist, and a former advisor to BC and Ontario on NAFTA. We just heard excerpts from Greer's interview with our chief political correspondent, Rosemary Barton. Let me ask you, I mean, you heard that interview. How important is that interview at this particular time, given the position that Jamieson Greer has? How closely are officials in Canada watching this?
Well, I'm sure everybody's watching. That was a hell of an interview. Now we need to go through it and figure out where we're actually getting the real stuff and where there's some problems. So let's just take for a minute what he had to say. So the first thing is that Ambassador Greer suggested that that the issue about sovereignty wasn't really what he had on his mind. But we know that, in fact, that can't be right, because when you look at the issue, which the U.S. has talked about for a long time, about Netflix and the issue about streaming, Canada already changed its policy with respect to the issue about the dollar figure with the Netflix issue. Canada wrote a $600 million check, so that, and they did that in June. So there's no way that could have been an issue on the table. The issue on the table was about discoverability. That was what the algorithm says. That was about digital sovereignty and capacity. It wasn't about tariffs. It was about Canada's ability to regulate. And that was the only issue that could be there. So I believe that Ambassador Greer believes perhaps what he says, but it can't be right, because that Ottawa already settled that with a check. There were other things that he said that also could not be right. So, for example, when he talks about national security, Canada has national security issues too, and the issue about sovereignty. But remember, Canada already gave up the issue about sovereignty, for example, with respect to deals with China in the CUSMA. Our problem is that some of the stuff that's a problem now is because we already ceded that before. So the Americans are just saying, well, why won't you go a step further? Why? You've already been there. So that's where the misunderstanding is, because the Prime Minister has sort of said that's enough and we're not going to go there again.
I mean, I think we're hearing from Jamieson Greer, and I'm going to be sort of colloquial about this. It's like two sides were negotiating. There appeared to be an agreement verbally, but he's suggesting that when Canada saw it in the fine print, it actually written out, that wasn't what Canada thought there was going to be, and then was upset and walked away. Is that what you're hearing him say? And I get your point. You don't believe that's what happened.
Well, I hear what he says, and I believe that he actually believes that, but that can't be the way it works, because when you do the negotiating text, you have a Canadian negotiator and an American negotiator writing. That's the way it works in the room. So it's not that the text just descends out of the heavens, out of nowhere. Both sides have been writing it. So there's a fundamental misunderstanding, or someone's trying to throw something in at the last minute. The reporting that's been coming out from Bloomberg and from the New York Times says a different story. Now, I talk a lot in the United States. I'm a professor in the United States as well as in Canada. In the United States, the U.S. has been losing the press on this issue. So I understand the unprecedented thing that Ambassador Greer will come on Canadian TV to try to win back some of that. But I got to tell you that Americans don't really want the war. The administration does. That's the problem. And he signaled something else tonight that's really important for Canadians. He talked about maybe that there should be some bans, just like Canada's had an alcohol ban. That's a warning, and that's code for the trade lawyers, and they're definitely watching. Because in the law that he used, Section 338, it says that if there is retaliation from another country, the president can ban goods at the border. So on September the 8th, he's telling us in code that they're going to ban Canadian goods, and they're going to say it's in retaliation for the alcohol ban, but foundationally, the president has that power unilaterally. So there's a lot underneath. These are code words, and there's signaling going back and forth. So I'm really glad that I can try to unpack some of that for viewers tonight.
Yeah, no, it is great to have your analysis on this. Let me ask you about the optics of this, because, as you said, this is an important interview in your mind that he has given to Canadian television. Canadians, you said off the top, a lot of people watching this, trade lawyers, but also average Canadians. What do you think of how he did in that interview and how Canadians who maybe don't know quite as much about this as you do, what will be the impression that they walk away with here?
Well, I think Ambassador Greer is a very clear, straight communicator, and he's very different from Secretary Lutnick and President Trump. So he's much more likable if you ask me. But that's clearly why they had him out there. But at the end of the day, no Canadian is going to like being told that we are going to have our economic policy dictated by the Americans. We're going to have our digital policy, our AI policy. We're going to have our cultural policy dictated from Washington. That is absolutely not acceptable. And foundationally, the power that we had to say no, nobody else has said no. If you say yes, even if you pay a price, you are nothing more than a vassal on this. And they've been using pressure to do that. Canada is the first country to say no, and they can't afford for that to happen. So I expect more pressure, more tariffs, more rather than less, because they want to beat Canada into submission on this, because they thought that worked the last time. And even though they got close, they can get the ball across, as they'd say. In football, they've got another chance. So this is a tough time, but there's a chance for Canada, because it's not about tariffs. It's about building something. If you build something positive, if you build with productivity, you build with innovation, you build a sovereign ability inside the country so that we have our own, then we have options rather than being forced. They think we have no options. That's what this is going to be about. The next 2 to 3 weeks in particular are going to focus on that and watch President Trump. He's getting ready. They try to kick us again, and he's going to want to see, will Canadians flinch or are they going to take it?
You're saying 2 or 3 weeks of potential pain coming. Do you see, based on that interview that you watched, any possibility of a return to the table? I mean, he did say that they don't have open communication channels right now. And I got to ask you to be quick on this answer. I'm running out of time.
The peacemaker is probably Secretary Besant, Treasury Secretary. He's got his hands full right now. He was supposed to have been there. He couldn't be in the room. If he had been in the room, I bet you we would have had a deal. He would have been able to equalize out from Secretary Lutnick. So there's a lot of inside Washington politics going on. Let's see this, but I think we got to be ready for some time, and Canadians got to be ready. This is a moment, and I think Canadians are ready for this moment like they've never been before. And it's because the Prime Minister has taken the initiative. He's seen the errors that were in the existing CUSMA and said, no more. We're not going to take this anymore. And that is a remarkable statement. We've got to see how this plays out.
Barry Appleton, thank you.